So now it's time that we begin talking about asynchronous JavaScript. And there are quite a few things that we are going to cover in this particular video. So we are going to talk about callbacks. So what is callbacks, how you can make use of them, and why callbacks matter. So if you're learning JavaScript today, why should you learn or understand this topic? Promises, what are promises, and why this concept exists. So that is something that we are going to understand. Async and await, these two are also important. All right, so if you wish to learn JavaScript seriously and build a lot of projects with JavaScript, then this video is going to help you a lot. So that is what I'm going to cover. I keep things simple and I'm going to have hands-on lectures with source code, and the examples that I'm going to use is pretty hands-on and pretty easy to understand. So without a further ado, let's jump right in. So now is the time that we talk about callbacks. Now, what is a callback? So by definition, a callback is a function that is passed as an argument to another function. Okay, a function that is passed as an argument to another function and is executed after a particular event or an operation completes. Now, let us understand in detail as to why you need something called as callbacks. Okay, so let me give you an example. Now, there will be scenarios wherein you are working on some sort of a code wherein you need to perform some sort of an external event or interface with some external system. Okay, which might take a little bit of time. It might not be instant like basic operations, but it might involve some bit of time that your system might need to wait to get the output. Okay, for example, an API call. So if you're doing an API call, what would happen is you would typically wait for the response from the API call, right? It's not like you trigger the API call and you get an instant response. It's not like that. You trigger an API call, you wait for the response, you get the response, and then you use the response. Okay, so let us simulate a scenario wherein we do an API call. Okay, so what I would do is I would simulate a scenario with the help of a timeout function. Okay, so in JavaScript we have something called as timeout. Okay, which basically can be used to set a delay on your end. Okay, so let me give you an example over here. Okay, so let's say I have this message. Okay, so I can say console.log over here. Okay, and I can say immediate. Now this message will be displayed immediately, right? It's not like it would be displayed after a while over here, right? It would be displayed immediately. Okay, but there will be scenarios wherein I might want to cause a delay. So in that case, you can make use of timeout. So you can say set timeout over here. Okay, I can have a function like this. Okay, and this would be anonymous function, no parameters. I can say console log, I can say delay, something like this, and I can even set the delay time. So let's say 2000. Now 2000 is milliseconds, which means it will be delayed by 2 seconds. So I can save this. You can see immediate, and after 2 seconds you will see delay over here, right? So that's how it works. If I add 3 dots over here, if I save this, you will see immediate and then a delay. Okay, so why are we learning about timeout right now? Why are we discussing timeout? Because we are going to make use of timeout to simulate an example of something that is dependent on an external system, like an API call, right? API call will take a little bit of time, right? You will trigger your request to the server, and then server will process the request. It will talk to the database and it will get back to you with the data. Okay, so there is a little bit of delay, like 1 second, 2 seconds, depending on how fast things are at your end, right? So there will be a delay. And how do we simulate a delay? We will be simulating the delay in our code with the help of timeout, right? So let's say I have a piece of code over here. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a function. Okay, so there's a function. I'll call this function as fetch data over here. Okay, I don't need any sort of parameters over here. Okay, and I'll have set timeout here like this. Okay, and I can actually make use of arrow functions over here. Okay, instead of the older syntax. I can upgrade to arrow functions, and here I can say data fetched from the server. Okay, so I can data from server. Okay, and here I can add a delay of 2 seconds. Okay, so this is done. All right, and what we can do is we can call this particular thing. Okay, so let us say I have I can say function over here. I can say process data over here. Okay, and here I can say fetch data, something like this. Okay, I'm calling this, and I'm calling process data. Okay, I'm saying okay, so I'm saying process data over here, something like this. So what is happening is I'm calling process data first over here. As you can see, process data is then calling fetch data, and fetch data is doing some sort of an operation like talking to an API or something, and it is getting the data. Okay, if I save this, okay, you'll see delay and data from the server after 2 seconds. Okay, so for now I'm just going to remove this. Okay, or I'll just comment this out since we have understood what timeout is. But here what we are trying to do is we are trying to fetch the data, and the data is being fetched at the delay of 2 seconds. Okay, now let us say if we are fetching the data and we get some sort of a response that we want to catch. Okay, let's say if we are fetching the data and we get a response from the server that we want to catch. So I'll have a hypothetical return over here, okay, which will represent, let's say this is the data that is being represented from the server. Okay, it's saying sample data. Okay, what would happen in this case is I can get the data over here. I can say let data over here. Okay, and I can do a console log over here. Okay, I can say data, something like this. Now if I save this, you'll see I don't get an output. I get undefined. Okay, this did not work because fetch data has a delay, right? So this thing took 2 seconds to return. Okay, but what happened is this got executed before this returned, right? This has a delay of 2 seconds. So this thing did not wait for this thing to finish executing and get back to it with the result. Instead, it executed this first, right? So what happened is we got undefined. So the data was returned, but like this code was executed, and this did not work as expected, right? Now imagine having an API call over here, a real API call instead of timeout over here. I'm having an API call and I'm fetching some response from the server. Now I need to wait to get the response from the server, right? I cannot just directly proceed to the next step, right? And this is where callbacks come into picture, right? This is a need of callback. So this example you can see, assuming that here you are having any sort of an operation that is causing some sort of a delay, okay, of around 2 seconds. And we have simulated that delay with the help of this set timeout function. So assuming that you are having a operation that is causing a delay, okay, this is how things would work without callbacks, right? So you need a callback, which is a function that is passed as an argument to another function and is executed after a particular event or operation completes. Now, what is the event in our case? The event in our case is this fetch operation or this delayed operation that we are having. Okay, so how would things work? Let me upgrade this example over here. Okay, so what I would do is I would have a callback here, something like this. Okay, and what we can do is rather than modifying this example, I would simply copy this example. Okay, and we would create, like I would keep this example intact and I would have callback over here. Okay, and I'll say with callback here. Okay, so this I'm doing so that we have both the examples and we can differentiate as to what is the difference. Okay, so you can see over here fetch data, and I'm calling fetch data with callback. Okay, so fetch data with callback, I can have callback over here. Okay, this is a callback. Okay, now over here I'm calling this process data with callback. Okay, and this is being called from here. Now how I would modify this is I would take this data as a parameter over here. Okay, I would get rid of this over here. Okay, so this is the callback function that would be executed once this operation is complete. So this operation of timeout, once it's complete, what we need to do is we need to print the data, right? So I'm accepting data as a parameter over here, and I'm doing a console log. Okay. Now what I would do is whenever I'm calling this process data with callback, what I would do is instead of calling this, I would say fetch data with callback over here. Okay. I would call straight away this function over here, and I would pass this as an argument, this function like this. So I'm making use of callbacks now. And if I save this, okay, let me add something over here with callback. Okay. And this is done with callback, and I'm getting the data. I'll add a colon. Okay. Now over here, rather than returning, okay, what I can do is I can say over here. So I have to create data first. Okay. So I'll say data is equal to something like this. Okay. So this is the data. So let's say this is the data that is being returned from the server. Now I'll take this data and I'll say callback, and I'll pass it to the data, something like this. And if I save this, you'll see the first one is undefined. You can see data from the server, and here you see with callback, right? So data from server is being printed twice because of this console log. So if I get rid of this and if I save this, you'll see data from the server. So this is one, and then you have with callback sample data over here. So I hope this is clear as to what is the use of callback over here. What is the use case? So here, this was a function that was supposed to be executed when the data was returned successfully. Okay, so over here, if you see, when the data was returned successfully, this function was being executed, like the code inside this, right? So instead of doing this, what we did is we are passing this function itself. So here you can see this function itself is being passed to over here to another function. Okay, this is a function that is interacting with the API or performing some sort of operation that is causing delay. Okay, and here this function is being passed as a callback. Okay, so once the operation is complete, the callback function is being called with the data, and data is coming over here and it is printing the data over here, right? So I hope this is clear. So instead of getting undefined now, what is happening is this entire operation is waiting. It is waiting for 2 seconds until the data is fetched, and then this process data with callback is being called along with the data that is received from the server, and then it is being printed onto the console, or whatever operation you want to perform that you can add over here. Okay, so that is how the callback works, and I hope it's clear as to why this thing matters. Okay, now one more thing I want to show you over here. You can have callbacks, like callbacks for success as well as errors. Okay, so that is something that I wish to show to you all. Okay, so what you can do is before going to callbacks with success and errors, I also want to show you one syntax over here, which is of anonymous callback functions over here. Okay, so here what we are doing is here in this particular example, if I copy this, okay, this is this is not anonymous, right? So let me update this to anon. Okay, I'll just say anon over here. Okay, and this one also anon, this one also anon over here. Okay, I hope everything is updated. All right, now what is happening is we are actually passing this function to this particular function over here, right? So we can like shorten the syntax. I can what I can simply do is I can simply cut this. Okay, and over here I can simply say function. Okay, I can simply accept data over here, and I can simply, okay, oops, I didn't need a curly brace. I can simply paste this like this. Okay, now this is not needed. Okay, so this is how the syntax becomes. Okay, with anonymous. Okay, so I can say with anon over here. I can save this, and you'll see data from server with callback with anon. Okay, and you can increase this to 3 seconds. Let us see how this operates. All right, you can see data from server, data with callback, and data with anon. Okay, or if I update this to 10 seconds, it should work well. Okay, actually one mistake over here. This is calling fetch data from with callback. Okay, so it's still referring to the old function, but I'll update it to with anon over here. I was wondering why it's not reflecting the changes in seconds. So you can see over here after 10 seconds now with anon will be reflected over here. You can see. Okay, you can see. So it worked perfectly fine with a shorter syntax. So this is an example of anonymous callback functions. Okay, now I wish to talk about callbacks for success and errors. Now there will be scenarios wherein if you're doing an API call, okay, there is a possibility of things being successful and not being successful, right? So I'll copy this over here. Let's say this is an operation that we want to perform. Okay, I'll say with success error. Okay, something like this. So you can have two callbacks over here, success callback, and you can have error callback, something like this. Okay, so what happens is over here inside, okay, within set timeout, you can have some code. Okay, so let's say I have a code occurred. Okay, I have error occurred. Let's say I'll keep this to true. Let's say it's a Boolean value over here. Okay. Now if error occurred, then what I need to do is I need to call success callback, right? Success callback with some data. I can pass in some data like error occurred, something like this. Okay. And if this is not the case, then I can say else over here. Okay. And instead of that, I can say, okay, so if it's not error, then probably you can have the normal thing going on like this. Okay, you can have this. And instead of calling callback over here, you will say error. Oops, this should not be error. This should be success callback. And actually, if it's an error, you will call the error callback over here, something like this, right? So this is how the calls will be. All right, and you can see so we'll change this to 4. Okay. 4000 milliseconds over here. Okay. Now what you can do is you can have these two callbacks also created over here. Okay. So here I can say function. Okay. So function on success like this, and you can say data over here. Okay. And here below you can say not confirm. It should be console.log over here, and you can say success. Okay, and you can have like data being printed onto the console. Okay, now the same thing you can duplicate for error as well. So you can say on error. Okay, like this, and instead of success you can say error, and it will display the data. Okay, so these are two functions. Now what you can do is when calling this, okay, when calling the fetch data. So if you say fetch data with success and error, you can say on success. Okay, on success first because you have success callback defined first, right? And then on error, something like this. Now if you save this, you should see on error being printed because we have simulated the error situation. You can see error occurred, right? So you can see, and this is being printed, error occurred. Right now you can upgrade this example to the anonymous function example. Okay, so first of all, this is an example of success and error. Okay, you can randomize this as well. So I can say I can make use of math.random. So math.random over here. Okay, if you say math.random, okay, it's a method inside math object. So you can see it is giving me random values between 0 and 1. You can see over here on the console. Okay, now I can say math.random less than 0.5. It will give me a Boolean value, true, sometimes false. So I can have this condition copied and added over here. Okay, so this error occurred condition is now dynamic, right? So if I save this, you can see like the error, you can see the error and success will be pretty much dynamic. Now if I save it again, so now it was error situation. It can be success as well. Okay, you can see success sample data, right? You can upgrade this to anonymous function. So I can cut this over here. Okay, you can say like this. Okay, and then you have this over here. Okay, so this is done. Okay, and then you can have the error one also. Now you can also chain callbacks. Okay, so let me show you how you can do that. Okay, so chained callbacks. All right, so let's say I have a function. Okay, so I'll have this function over here. Okay, let me call this. Oh, sorry, not let me copy this. So I'll call this function as step 1. Okay, it has a callback set timeout, and here I'll have a console log over here, which says step 1 done over here. Okay, something like this. I'm having a callback as well over here, which does not accept a parameter. Okay, and instead of 10,000, I'll stick to 1,000 over here. So this is one function that I have with a callback. This is step 1. Let's say I have a step 2. So I'm doing a multiple set of operations over here. Okay, this is step 2. I'll say this is step 2 again over here. Okay, I'll come over here again. I'll say this is step 3, something like this. This is step 3 again over here. Okay, so over here, now what I can do is I can say step 1. So first I'll call step 1. Okay, within step 1, I'm going to have an arrow function like this. Okay, and here I can say step 2. Okay, so within the arrow function, I'll say step 2. Now step 2 needs a parameter. So instead of that, I'll pass in an arrow function over here again. Okay, and then over here, I'll again have step 3, something like this. So I'll say something like this, like so, and over here, like so. Okay, and here I'll just mention console.log all completed. Okay, something like this, all completed. I'll say steps. Okay, I'll add a semicolon here, and I'll say save over here. Okay, now you'll see step 1 done, step 2 done, step 3 done. Okay, and all steps completed. All right, in the end you see like success sample data, because this had a lot of timeout was longer over here, and this one also had a longer timeout, right? But here you can see step 1, step 2, and step 3 were completed. Okay, and this is how you can do an operation that involves multiple asynchronous operation. Okay, now also I would like to highlight one more thing over here. Like this thing of chaining callbacks is also known as callbacks hell. So if you Google, or if you're reading about JavaScript or callbacks, you'll come across this term called callbacks hell, and this is what it is, wherein you are chaining callbacks or creating a pyramid of callbacks wherein the callbacks are nested inside each other. So those are nested inside each other. Now, this is not a recommended practice, all right, because it is making the code harder to read and maintain as well. So anyone reading your code tomorrow, okay, it would be tough for him to understand what is happening over here, all right. And if you have more callbacks or more asynchronous operations, more API calls that you're doing, then it would be even more difficult, and you might even make mistakes as a developer, all right. So yeah, this is what callback hell is. It's not a recommended practice, but I wish to explain and teach this concept to you all. Okay, now you can even make use of callbacks. Okay, use callbacks with array methods. Okay, so arrays have some good methods that are useful over here. Okay, let me demonstrate this to you. So I can say number over here, or I should say numbers. Okay, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 over here. Okay. Now you can say, let's say we wish to double, or we wish to get a array with where every number is doubled in this array. So I can say let doubled numbers. Okay, and over here what I can do is I can say numbers dot map. Okay, so I'll have map over here, and here I can say function. Okay, so I'll have a function statement. This won't have a name. You can even create a function using arrow functions. Okay, but I'm doing it this way, and you can say return numbers into 2, something like this. So you are just doubling the number over here. Okay, and then over here you are seeing console log. Okay, so I'll just say log over here. Okay, and you can say double numbers, something like this. Okay, so now, okay, so we're getting an error that number reference is not defined. Okay, so function numbers. Okay, so this has to be numbers. or you can call this as number. Okay, not numbers. Numbers is the name of the array anyways. So if you save this, you'll see this is the output. Okay, so what is happening is this map function is taking callback as an input. Okay, because this is also function and this is also function. You can see. So that is how it's operating. Okay, so map methods takes a callback function and applies it to the each element in the arrays. All right. So yeah, that's about callbacks. All right. Now coming back to the theory. Okay, what are callbacks? So you are pretty much clear now. Callbacks is a function that is passed as an argument to another function and is executed after a particular event or operation is completed. So they allow you to control the order of execution, handle multiple tasks, and also respond to events. All right. But keep in mind, excessive use of callbacks over here, like we saw, can lead to callback hell. Okay. And this is not a good practice. All right. So yeah, these are callbacks, and I hope this was useful. So now it's time that we talk about promises and how they can make our life easier. So like the definition says over here, promises provide a cleaner and a more structured way to handle asynchronous operations. Of course, what these methods are, we'll talk about them. But first, let's understand what promises are. So whenever you're doing asynchronous operation, one way to get them done is via callbacks. So if I paste some code over here, okay, this is a asynchronous operation that is happening, and I'm making use of callbacks over here. So you can see this is a function that is doing the operation. I'm accepting a parameter called callback, and I have this asynchronous operation wherein you can assume like I'm fetching some data from the API, and this is the data that I'm getting. It's an object. And then I'm calling this callback function over here once this data is fetched, right? Now, this callback function is actually this function that is being passed. So when I'm calling get data, I'm passing in this anonymous function with the help of arrow function syntax. And you can see this is being called once get data is done. So if I save this, you'll see like after 1 second, this data is being printed onto the console. So this is callbacks, but promises is a better approach whenever you're working with asynchronous operation, right? Because if you are doing a lot of asynchronous operations, then callback might lead to callback hell, wherein it might be difficult for you to manage different callbacks when you are using them extensively, right? So promises are a better approach. Now let me convert this example into an example with promises. Okay, so I'm going to write the same example where I'm actually getting this JSON data from, let's say, a server, and I'll do this with the help of promises. Okay, so I'll copy this function first of all. Okay, and I'll get rid of this part over here. Okay, because this is what we are going to change. Now, instead of having this timeout and then doing a callback to, or doing a call to this callback function, what I will do is I'll remove this. I'll say return new promise. Okay, promise, something like this. Okay, now if you hover on this, let me see if we get a documentation. Okay, you can see over here. So this is a promise. Okay, and you will have, so within promise over here, you're going to have a function. Okay, so here inside, I'm going to have a arrow function defined like this. Okay, like so. All right, and I'll add a semicolon over here. Okay, now this promise needs this function, and within this function, you need two parameters. Okay, now what are these parameters? One will be resolve, and other one will be by the name reject over here. Okay, now why do we have resolve and why do we have reject? Now whenever you are doing an asynchronous operation, there can be two states that can occur. One is that asynchronous operation was successful, and the second state can be that the asynchronous operation that you performed was not successful. Okay, so here if you see a little bit of documentation, you'll see like you have two arguments, a resolved callback. Resolved means the operation was successful. So resolve is just a term used to say that the callback or whatever the operation happened was successful. Okay, and reject meaning that the error happened, or for some reason the operation was not successful. So we are having two callbacks over here, resolve and reject. Okay. Now what we are going to do over here is I'm going to have the logic. So asynchronous operation comes over here. So what is my asynchronous operation? I'll take this asynchronous operation. I'll add it over here. Okay. Now one more change we need to make is here we are calling callback, right? So I'll get rid of callback over here. We don't need callback. And instead of callback, I'll say resolve over here, something like this. So what I'm doing is once the operation is complete, I'm saying resolve this particular callback. That is what I'm doing. Okay. And resolve will be called, and then whoever is the caller, there we can perform the next steps. Okay. So what I can do over here is I can say get data like so. Okay. So I'll call get data, but now this is returning a promise, right? So I can say dot then. Now there are two methods that you need to be aware of, then and catch over here. Okay. Now what is then? So if you hover on then, I might see your documentation. Okay. I'm not seeing them, but then actually is the successful completion of this promise. Okay. And if you want to handle error, then you have to do it in catch. Okay. So here you can say data, and I'll have an arrow function over here. Okay. Something like this. And I'll say log over here. Okay. And I'll say data. Something like this. Okay. And then I can copy this same thing over here. And here instead of data, I can say error over here like so. And instead of console.log, I can log the error in this format, and I can save it. Okay. And you can see the output here. Okay. You can see. So the output I'm getting is only one. Ideally, I should be getting two, one for this and other one for this one. But there seems to be a problem because the functions names are same over here. Get data, everywhere get data. Okay. So I'll call this one get data. Okay. I'll say with promise over here, something like this. Okay. And instead of calling get data over here, I'll say get data with promise. All right. So now there is some sort of separation in the names over here. This is get data and this is get data with promise. And if you save this, you'll see this one is from the first and this one is from the second. Okay. So it works absolutely fine. And you can see what happened over here. Okay. So what we did is we defined this function get data with promise with a return over here. So this is a return. It's returning a promise now, right? Now inside the promise constructor. So when calling this promise or when creating this promise inside this constructor, we simulate an asynchronous data retrieval operation using set timeout. Okay, so whatever operation you're doing will go inside the constructor is something that you need to keep in mind. Okay, now once the data is retrieved over here, okay, once the data is retrieved, we call resolve over here. Okay, now resolve function is called over here to fulfill the promise with the retrieved data. So we are passing in the data also because we want to fulfill this promise now with the retrieved data. And then what is happening is when you're calling get data with promise over here, okay, you're making use of then and catch over here. So these are two methods that can help you handle the successful fulfillment of the promise or the failure of the promise. So then is being used to handle the successful fulfillment. So here if you scroll up, when the promise is fulfilled, and catch when the promise is rejected. So you can see if there is any error, the promise is rejected, then the catch will be executed. Okay. So you can see this is the syntax of promise, and in this way, they provide a cleaner and a structured way to handle asynchronous operations in JavaScript. All right. Just keep in mind that the operation that you want to do, okay, will go over here within the constructor. You can see this entire thing over here. This entire thing is within the promise constructor. Okay. So this is the promise. And then if I say Control C, you can see this entire thing is going within the constructor. That is what you're supposed to keep in mind. Now, if this definition is getting a little bit complicated because it just says that it provides a cleaner and structured way to handle async operations. Okay. So you can think of promise as this way as well, that promises actually are representing a value that may be available now, it may be available in future, or it may never be available. Because so if it's available now, okay, it's available. If it's not available, then it's being fetched. right? So that is a state. And if it's never being available means an error has occurred. So these are the three states that normally a promise would have, right? So yeah, that's about the promise. Now let me show you the failure scenario as well over here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here. I'm just going to duplicate this code here with promises, and I'm going to add a colon. I'm going to say success and failure over here, something like this. And I'm going to call this all as one. So one. So just differentiating the function name so that there are no conflicts as such. Okay. So we are working with this now, one. Okay. So get data with promise one. Now over here, I'll have a, let's say, I have a success or a failure rate defined. Okay. So within timeout, I can say let success. Okay, so I'll have a 50% success rate. So I'll say math.random over here. And if math.random is less than 0.5, okay, so it will give a true or false. So the success will have Boolean, whether it's true or false, right? And then over here, what I can do is I can say if statement over here, okay, and I can say if success, all right, then we are getting this data like so. So I'll move this inside. All right. And if it's not successful, then I have an else block over here. Okay. And within else, I can say reject. Okay. So resolve, what is resolve for? Resolve is for resolving the promise, means the data fetch has been successful and please resolve this promise. Now, if an error has occurred, you will call reject over here and you will pass a message. You can pass a message. You can provide any reason like error and some reason over here. So I'll just say some reason. Okay. You can add the reason depending on your scenario. All right. But this is how it will be. Okay. And I have if else and there's nothing else. Okay. So now if you save this, so you have success over here. If you save this again, let us see. Okay. You can see error some reason. So this condition failed and you're getting an error over here. So this promise failed actually. Okay. So this is how you can have success and failures handled. Okay, so if you have a scenario, so here we didn't handle this scenario, we just said resolved. Okay, so it just took care of the resolved. But now if there is an error or something like that, so for example, you might have a check on data that you're getting from the server. If the data received is null, then you might say reject and there is some error. Okay, so in that case, if reject is being called, then catch happens to execute over here and whatever is there in the catch, that gets executed. All right. So yeah, this is an example of success and failure with promise. Now there will be scenarios when working with promises where you might want to execute a piece of code irrespective of whether the promise is fulfilled or rejected, right? So in that case, you have this finally. Okay, you can say finally over here. Okay, and in the similar way, like you had the other two things defined, you can say console.log, okay, and you can say finally over here. I would just add this message. Okay, you can have any sort of message over here. So this will be executed irrespective of whether there's a success or a failure. So if I save this, you'll see finally, okay, and you can see there is a failure. Okay, if I save this again, okay, I'm getting the same output. Okay, this is again a failure. You can see this time it's success and you get finally as well. Okay, so finally is also a part, but yeah, main thing resolves around then and catch over here. Okay, now let me show you one more scenario, okay, wherein you might want to have multiple promises together. So let's take an example wherein we want to run multiple promises in parallel. Okay, so you can say multiple promises over here. Okay, now let me create multiple promises. So I'll say let promise one. Okay, how would you create this? You just call fetch data with promise. Okay, so fetch data with promise. Okay, let me copy this. Okay, it's not fetch actually, it's get data with promise one. Sorry about that. Okay, so yeah, I called this. Okay, and on this call it will return a promise object. Okay, so I'm getting that over here. Okay, so this is 1, this is 2, and this is 3. I need to rename this. It will be 2 and this is 3. All right. So 3 promises created. Now let's say I wish to have all these 3 promises executed in parallel. So what I can do is I can say promise over here dot all. You can see this all method, and here you can pass in an array with promise 1, promise 2, and promise 3, something like this over here. Okay, and then over here you can say then, like so, and you can have the results over here. Okay, so after this is done, let's say I wish to do this. Okay, so I'll have this, and instead of, you can say all done. Okay, so I'll have this message all done, something like this. Okay, or else you can add a catch as well. So I can copy this over here. Okay, and here I can add a catch. All right, and this will end with semicolon. So I can save this, and you'll see. So these 2 are executed. Okay, and wait, let me comment these 2 calls, because now we are doing a lot of calls. Okay, so you might get or let me add a console log in between. Okay, so what I would do is I would copy this console log over here. Okay, and here I'd say multiple, something like this. Okay, so now you would see multiple is being printed. Okay, and okay, it's asynchronous call, right? So it's being printed in the first. Okay, what I will have to do is I'll have to disable these calls. That would be the best, I think. Okay, so oops, I would disable this as well. Okay, and I would disable this one with success and failure, like so. Okay, and I'll save this. Okay, now you can see this one got rejected. Okay, so I'm getting this error. Let me get the success scenario over here. Okay, so I'm getting error only. Okay, all right, so you can see all done over here, and all the 3 promises were successful. You can see over here. Okay, so this is how it is. You can add if you want. We didn't add a custom message for the failure. You can see at least 1 promise failed. Okay, and if you save this, you'll see at least 1 promise failed. So one thing I would want to mention over here is if any 1 promise fails, okay, then the rest are also like marked as failed. You know, any one fails. If any one fails, you can see this in the output over here. So any one is failing, and that is the reason why you're getting this failure as the output. Now if I run this again, okay, let me see this. You can see now all 3 were executed successfully. So you're seeing all done as the output. Okay, similar way there is one more method. Okay, which says which is race method. Okay, so now there will be a scenario wherein you want to make use, or wherein you want to get the output or find the first settled promise, right? So in that case, what you can do is you can say promise dot race, and like you had the array of promise over here, you can do this. Okay, and you can have a similar syntax. So instead of making use of all, you're making use of race over here. That is it. Okay, and here you can say this done. Okay, and here you can say race. Okay, so I'll just mention race everywhere so that we know that this output is from race. Okay, I'll save this. So you can see all done, race, this is done. So this one was executed over here. This is from race. Okay, so you can see one promise failed, error, and even race there was some one promise failing. Okay, so yeah, this is how race and promise works. Okay, race essentially will get you the first promise that resolves, and all will help you execute or fulfill all the promises in parallel. Okay, so these are promises, and I hope this has been clear. So in a nutshell, promises provide a cleaner way and a more structured approach to handle a synchronous operation. Okay, then and catch, and also finally are some of the methods that you can make use of Okay. And these are the methods that help you work with promises. So now it's time that we begin talking about async await. Now, async and await help us simplify our asynchronous code even further. All right. Now over here, I have an example already written wherein I have this function which is returning a promise. Okay. And within the promise, we are actually having this asynchronous code wherein I'm simulating a delay over here of 1000 milliseconds. All right. And I have a success rate over here of 50% randomly chosen, and there can be success or a failure over here. Okay. And I'm making use of this like this. So if a promise is resolved, then this is being used then. And if it's not, if there is any error, then we make use of catch. So this is a syntax when working with promises. Now the problem over here is this is still not readable. The way you are consuming this is not readable. And with the help of these two keywords, you can simplify this even further. All right. So let me give you an example. So I'll just comment this out. Okay. What I can do is, let's say I wish to consume this get data. Okay. So what I can do is I can say function over here. Okay. And I'll say fetch data or fetch data, let's call it. Okay. And I'll fetch it in async manner. Okay. Now over here, what I can say is I can say let data, and I can say get data over here. Okay. So get data is the name of our function over here. Okay. So I'll also call this as get data instead of fetch data. Okay. Okay. So I have things this way now. Okay. And let me also add this log statement over here, console.log, wherein I'm printing data. Now this, of course, let's see what's the output over here. Okay. So we're not getting anything over here. Okay. So what I would do is I would call this function. Okay. I forgot to call this function in short. Okay. And I would save this. Okay. So you are getting a promise now. Okay. You are not getting the result. Okay. How would you get the result? So to get the result using async and await keyword, you can make use of async like this, and you can add await over here like so. Okay. And you would get the data now. You can see. All right. So this is a syntax pretty much readable and pretty much simpler than this one. All right. So this still is not readable, and this thing simplifies it even further. Okay. Now async and await are dependent on each other. If you try to remove async and if you try to save, you'll see this await is only valid in async functions. So you need to have async. If you try to remove await over here, and if you try to save this, you'll get a promise. Okay. And you can see this is an error. Okay. So you need to make use of both over here to get the right output. All right. And you can even do error handling over here. So you can use error handling. You can do error handling with the help of simple try catch. Okay. And whatever error you are getting, you can log it this way, something like this, and you can move this code inside of it. Okay. And here you can say I can add error, something like this. Okay. Now if there is a failure over here, you would see this error message. Okay. You can see error and error some reason. All right. Now the benefit over here of the syntax is, one, it's readable. Okay. Another benefit is you can run multiple async operations in parallel. Okay. So I can like have one more over here. Okay. So let's call this as one over here. Okay. I'll say this is 1. Okay. And this thing I'll add over here. I'll say this is 2. Okay. And I'll quickly change the variable name over here. So I'll say this is data 1. This is data 2. Okay. This becomes data 1, data 2. Okay. And let me save this and let us see. You can see this is error. Okay. Now one promise failed, right? So this got executed. Okay. The rest of the block was not executed. But if I run this again, you'll see 1, and then the second promise failed. Okay. So 1 was executed, but second promise failed. Earlier on, first promise had failed. Okay. Let me save this again. You'll see 1 and 2. This time both were successful, right? You can have parallel operations like these. And as you can see over here, or as you can it's pretty simple to understand, and the syntax is also easy. Okay, there is no complicated thing involved. Okay, so you can see first one failed, so of course nothing will be executed in this block, right? So I'll save this again. Let us see. Okay, but let me, like, instead of this, let me call this, or let me like increase the success rate to, let's say, 90%. 1, 2, and 3. So I increase the success rate, and you can see all 3 were successful, right? So this is how it works. And coming to the documentation, async await simplifies the asynchronous code by making it look like synchronous code. So it's looking like synchronous code, normal JavaScript, okay, easier to read and easier to maintain. And even for beginners, this is pretty simple, right? People can easily make out what is happening. Okay, so with the help of await, we are telling that wait for this operation to complete, because this is an async operation. So it waits, it finishes this, then it waits for this to complete, it finishes this, then it waits for this to complete. And because we are making use of await, we have to mark this function as async over here. Okay, so it improves the readability and makes the error handling straightforward with try catch. So over here, you had to make use of catch, right? Then and catch. Now over here, it's pretty straightforward, like standard JavaScript, try and catch. Okay, and you can use async await with multiple asynchronous operations, HTTP request, and more. All right, so all that is possible, and it's a amazing, like, these things are being used a lot. So if you're checking any JavaScript code, or if you're working with APIs a lot, which of course you will since you're learning JavaScript, okay, you will see these 2 keywords a lot. All right, so these 2 are important. Like if you want to go advanced into JavaScript, you want to use things like React and all. All right, these await and async is something that you should understand really well. All right, so I hope this is useful, and I hope you have been able to follow along.